Hi everybody, I'm Andy Murray from WhatCulture, and who the hell is this beside me?
I'm Michael Sidgwick from WhatCulture.
The afternoon team from yesterday is back, but we've got a whole lot more to talk about today because AEW and NXT happened, and so did all kinds of things. So let's break down what we're going to go through. We are going to talk a little bit about Jim Ross roasting his own goddamn product. We're going to mention the massive AEW angle that ran after Dynamite went off the air. And on top of all that, we've got a little update on Chick Magnet Phil, CM Punk, and WWE Backstage. What the hell is going on there? Would you like to do the Wilborn thing, or will I do the Wilborn thing?
This is the news.
That was a lot better than I would have done it. Thank you very much. But we're going to start things off with the only way we can really start things off today, and that is the huge angle. The first huge angle, really, on NXT since it debuted on the USA Network that closed last night's show. It was a real ripper. Finn Balor turned heel. So things were setting up for a big showdown in the ring between the Undisputed Era and all the top baby faces on the brand. You had Tommy Ciampa, you had Johnny Gargano taking some time off from hanging out on the bridge and being a goth, and out came Finn Balor, and it looked like we were going to get a 3-on-4 until Finn Balor sensationally Pele kicked Gargano right in his big stupid face. He then kind of hung out in the corner, looking all cool, looking all not bothered at all as Undisputed Era destroyed Tommaso Ciampa. Balor went to the outside. He literally drop-kicked Gargano through a barricade, which looked amazing.
Yeah, it was tits.
It was really good. And then he hit the move formerly known as Sunday Bloody Sunday, the
1916
thing. That's the name. Onto the ramp drove. Gargano's head, spine, neck, all of that compressed on the ramp. Stare down with Undisputed. Is he joining? Probably not, but let's dive into this angle, Michael Sidgwick. Given that we haven't seen anything major, game-changing like this on NXT so far, despite the show's obvious qualities, what did you make of it?
I absolutely adored this. I've been waiting patiently, well, impatiently, for a huge emotional hook to get me invested into the product to watch it the next week beyond, oh, this is going to be a really good match. That's going to be a really good match. Oh, that'll probably be a really good match too. I needed an emotional hook, and goddammit, I got it. I absolutely adored also the blocking of this angle. Usually, when NXT runs an angle, for me, it's all a bit civil and a bit cinematic. And usually, I was expecting Finn Balor to sort of take a step back, a la Seth Rollins, and telegraph it and make it look very posy. But no, he stepped in front, whacked him with a Pele kick. Outstanding blocking of this segment. He looked like $1,000,000. The barricade spot looked absolutely superb, as did the DDT. I could not have enjoyed this more. It's made me want to watch NXT over AEW Dynamite. Not really. AEW is the best. But no, seriously, it needed an angle like this, and I thought it was executed and envisioned to perfection.
Yeah, this was tremendous. Really tremendous stuff. It's everything we have been calling out for since NXT debuted. Loads of great matches, minimal great angles. This was it. This was tremendous. I have, Finn Balor as a heel is something I've been crying out internally for a long, long time. If you've not seen Prince Devitt before, you are about to see vaults of charisma unlocked in this man that you never knew existed.
Yes.
And I cannot wait to see what happens next.
Indeed.
Tremendous stuff. Anyway, speaking of AEW mentioned there, Jim Ross just can't help himself, can he? Man is, he has been much improved in recent weeks on Dynamite. I think that's fair to say. I was particularly surprised by his excellent performance in the Joey Janela, I almost said Ken Shamrock there. It's a spring break match, that, isn't it? Kenny Omega match, the lights out, unsanctioned brawl. He was awesome in that on Dark, really putting it over, whereas in the past he might have been a bit grumpy and not really got why they were doing so many spots and all this stuff. But anyway, Jim Ross, much improved lately. Unfortunately, he had some comments towards his own product on a recent episode of the Grilling JR podcast with friend of the channel, Conrad Thompson, and I'll just read this quote, not in his voice because it's quite long and that'll take all day. He says, Are AEW doing too many flips and flops for my taste? They sure are, but they're weaning themselves off that a little more because that type of wrestling is not new and fresh. How many times have you seen a 450, a 620, blah, 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 blah? We gotta figure out something else that's going to get people's attention. It might be a wrestling match. It might be using psychology and grabbing them by the emotional balls and pulling them in right along with a story. Michael Sidgwick, break it down.
Right. Jim Ross at this point is turning more often than the Big Show. Like when he was his first early AEW commentary appearances, I was kind of apoplectic because he was doing this, but at the booth. And then when Dynamite first aired, I was astonished. The old Jim Ross was back. I fell in love with the man all over again. Thought he was incredible. I thought he was charming, witty, professional. The old authority was there. The old gravitas was there. But now, why has he said this? I don't understand. And what's ironic is that he says, what is the quote? Let's have a look at this quote. That type of wrestling is not new and fresh anymore. Did you hear the reaction to the Lucha Bros versus Private Party match?
Exactly.
That was an absolute barnstormer. It was 189 miles per hour. It was ridiculous. It was outstanding. That was the loudest crowd reaction I've heard from a North American crowd in absolutely months, maybe even years.
Pittsburgh was on fire.
A cauldron. It was outstanding. The thing is, I kind of understand his point to an extent, because by the time it got to Best Friends versus Young Bucks, which was the third tag team match of a similar kind of style, I think the returns were diminishing somewhat.
For sure.
Until the last 5 minutes, where they won the crowd over, because the Young Bucks are the best storytellers in the business. So I can kind of see his point, but the point is, he should not be making that point. He should be putting his own personal tastes at the door and being objective in his guise as a play-by-play commentator.
Yeah, he is there to prove, he is paid money, good money, as he points out in this interview, rather smugly, which is weird, to put their product over, and he's not doing that when he says things like this, which actively diminish it. There is something of a good point buried in there. There absolutely is, and I will say that some of the flippy-dippy doodah stuff is not my favourite style of wrestling.
It was last night, Jesus Christ, that first match.
It was phenomenal stuff. Like, I really hate this line about using psychology as well. The idea that you can't have flips and psychology in the same match furthers this ridiculous online narrative we have that's, you know, perpetuated by the Jim Cornette types of the world who see a fancy gif and immediately goes, I can't tell stories. It's complete and utter nonsense. Like, Dave Meltzer had a really good tweet on it this morning, and I'll get slagged off here for you know, quoting Meltzer or whatever, but he was talking about Paul Heyman. He always says what works, works. And if you listen to the reactions of the live crowd in the building, you know what's good psychology, lads? Anything that works for the story. And if the story you are telling is a couple of hyper-athletic teams taking each other out with progressively bigger bombs until one of them has gassed out and can't last the pace, that's good psychology.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Mark Quinn was fantastic in this match. Obviously,
He's
Phoenix
phenomenal.
was the total MVP, but Mark Quinn's ability to sell, I thought, oh God, he's actually got down with a bit of an injury here. But no, he was just selling the fact that he was exhausted. He'd been outworked by two more experienced guys. I just thought this match was incredible, and it completely betrayed the point he made on that podcast. However, I will say Jim Ross on this podcast at large is on phenomenal form. He's hilarious. Get it listened to in full.
It's very good stuff, and Conrad is always great.
Oh, Conrad's the best.
Buy us a beer. Up next, we're going to talk a little bit more about AEW because, you know, NXT probably stole the headlines at the end of the night with that awesome angle. AEW, I don't know if this was a response to that, maybe they heard it filtering through, but they ran a little angle after the show went off the air. It screened on Fight TV, so if you're viewing that way, you'd have seen the whole thing. And it came off pretty well. It came off like they were trying to capture a bit of buzz, and they've certainly done that. What happened was the Pac-John Moxley match concluded. I shall not spoil that, not only for you viewers, but also for the great editor Ben Roy Turner. There was a beatdown, there was a bit of a brawl afterwards. Pac actually looked like he was going to Pillmanize John Moxley's neck with a steel chair, which would have been quite the bold move. Anyway, out came Kenny Omega, who of course can't have John Moxley breaking his neck, because then who's he going to face at Full Gear? Kenny Omega saved John Moxley. They stood up, they kind of had a little face-to-face, like, what the hell's going on here, brother? Hangman Page eventually got involved as well. We got him and Pac getting into it a little bit. Hangman grabbed the mic and said, where you going, Pac? You going to buy me a beer? Something along those lines. That's not how Hangman speaks at all.
Nah, not really.
But anyway, as well as kind of like the brutal visual of Pac going to snap John Moxley's neck, we seemingly have Pac versus Page 2 set for Full Gear.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. In retrospect, I think I was a little bit more prepared to enjoy their Dynamite match more than it was actually really great. I think possibly it was a bit too slow, a bit too methodical. I think they maybe will adapt the lessons from the reaction to that match and have a total 15-minute ripper that they're more than capable of at Full Gear. And what I love about this match is that it's impossible to predict because there's a gravity to the wins and losses. To the further the Hangman Page sort of teasing a heel turn storyline, is Pac getting prepared for that title push. It could go in either direction. It should be a way better match than Dynamite. I can't wait.
Yeah, Full Gear is shaping up to be one hell of a pay-per-view.
Oh, it's going to be absolutely incredible.
Cannot wait. And our final story today is CM Punk. Yeah, just going to talk about him for like the 7th week in a row. There's been a lot of talk about him coming in as a host or a guest or a regular panelist or whatever on the WWE Backstage show that recently debuted. But Fightful Select, a very reliable source, of course, have come through with an update on the situation. They say that while nothing is final yet, nothing is concrete, nothing is certainly over, they reckon that Fox are now moving on from CM Punk, who claimed the other day that he hadn't actually heard back after the audition that supposedly went very well. Fox have moved on. They're looking at someone else, probably not getting old Pepsi Phil on the telly. So that's kind of a shame, I guess, although it'd be a pretty lame return, right? Punk finally comes back to wrestling as a talk show guy.
Yeah, it would be a lame return, but ultimately I would have taken great perverse pleasure from the idea of CM Punk having to either ruthlessly bury or like sort of mildly praise through gritted teeth a product that he absolutely despises. I think it would have been great car crash television for a few months. It would have been a bit depressing, but ultimately the guy's incredibly rich, he's incredibly fulfilled. He probably doesn't need this. Do wrestling fans need this?
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. Even if that led to a later in-ring return somehow, you've already seen the guy on TV for 3 months. So like the uniqueness, the specialness, the pop is gone. It's just kind of, it would be lame as hell.
I've heard so many people talk about this man that I think he could kill several school children and still get a gigantic pop.
Yeah, probably true. If he comes back, I just want to see him wrestle. Or cut promos. Something cool. Anyway, let's move on to your Twitter questions for the day. Number one here comes from Chico Stick, who asks, with Finn Balor's heel turn, do you think there will be a shift in the ratings next week? Not this week, next week. Maybe NXT beats AEW.
I do not think for a second that NXT is going to beat AEW. But it'll be a nice little indication of Finn Balor's star power. Surely they'll increase. By what kind of increment? I've no idea. Maybe 100,000? Yeah. That might be ambitious because they're kind of hemorrhaging viewers, but this is precisely the kind of angle and hook that they've needed. So, you know what? I'd love to see a big ratings increase because it would send a message that, right, you can't do the whole beatdown after a winning victory. That sets up a match. Or they can do like someone wins a match, someone comes out in the entrance ramp, stares them down, there's a nice little face-to-face visual, match graphic, there you go, that's the work done. That's not an angle for me. They've been doing too much of that, and hopefully this real kind of audacity and creativity could convince viewers, you know what, they've really got some storytelling there, gears whirring. Yeah,
come and check this thing out. It's awesome. You want to see what happens next week. I completely agree. Another question here from Sam Long. Had a question from him yesterday as well. Shout out to you, Sam. He asks, another great show from NXT last night, which will undoubtedly be less well received than AEW. I feel that if NXT was put on by a brand new company, people would talk about it as positively as AEW. Is WWE's umbrella hurting NXT? We could do a podcast on that.
That is an incredible question.
It's tremendous, isn't it?
That's a tremendous question. I do think, personally for me, right, and I'm meant to be objective, I do resent almost NXT's presence because I'd love to see AEW's rating if it went unopposed with NXT. I'd love to see that. I think it's a complete dick move to oppose them, even though it's business. Because I don't want to see WWE take over the wrestling world because their way or the highway is their motto, and it's just not for me. Like, the best of the WWE stuff is definitely for me, but too much of it is a terrible thing. There's, on my side, a bit of resentment, but I don't think people are that pedantic. I do generally think that even before the move to USA, there was kind of a sense of dryness and, just a real dryness about the product that didn't really engage people. If you look at the network rankings from the Wrestling Observer, even Table for Three was beating that weekly NXT show on certain occasions. So, I don't necessarily think it's a WWE thing. I just think they're doing far too much of getting ready-made indie guys from other promotions, claiming them as their own and presenting it under this, like, everything's coloured within the lines very perfectly. It's not really exciting. So I don't necessarily think it's got anything to do with WWE. I think the brand has been heading down this road for quite some time.
I think there might be an association problem with the younger viewers who we know from looking at the demographics are not they're not tuning into NXT. They've done terrible in the demographic. They're getting slaughtered by AEW in the 18 to 49 every single week. I think that these younger folks, like late teens and early 20s, look at anything with WWE on it as not being cool. And there is that within those people who weren't watching anyway, who haven't watched in years. You obviously get your hardcores and so forth. But, you know, part of it as well is that WWE have been saying NXT is the minor league for like 4 or 5 years. And that's not a criticism. They had to do that because it was the minor league. However, it's very difficult to change the perception after when you're on network TV. Maybe it'll come someday. I would love to see it come someday. I would love both shows. I would love both shows to be just knocking out of the park every single week. But for now, you know, there are different shows that cater to different tastes, and that's valuable as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So, final question of the morning comes from Gustavo. Hopefully not Gustavo Fring from Breaking Bad. He was a bad man. He's got half a face now. He asks, Dark Order are generously the 6th best tag team in AEW. Their gimmick isn't over and they don't have enough heat to be the top heel team. Where do they fit in this stacked division? We should probably ask Jules because he's Stu Grayson, so he knows.
There's an incredible disconnect between how talented they are and the presentation of the gimmick. This is not a hot take whatsoever. In fact, it's such a cool take that I'm really surprised that AEW have kind of like neglected it thus far. But maybe they haven't. They went to the trouble of building them as the guys who want to buy, only to get knocked out in the first round. Well, their first round, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
So that felt like either a waste of time or a weird decision from the off. Maybe they've retconned it, who knows? I'm just ultimately very confused. One thing I will say about the Dark Order is that we've always said the potential's there. Their work as Super Smash Brothers was fantastic. And if you look at the match that they followed last night, if you looked at the presence of Chris Jericho, who diverted attention all the way, the incessant camera cuts, which again, the live crowd couldn't see, but they were still distracted by Chris Jericho up in the rafters. The last 5 minutes of that match were really well received. With total fire. Everyone was popping. So to bring the match back to there from where it was is a real indication of how good that team actually is, and it's just a way of connecting them to the fan base. How they do that, I don't know, but there is definitely mileage in that act yet.
Great wrestlers, crap gimmick, love the big man's thing, gesture like this.
Know what I love?
It's really good.
Stu Grayson going, woo!
Yeah, right over the top of the corner.
Ridiculous.
Absurd. What a crazy human, born and bred for combat.
Indeed, amazing.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us today. Oh, we haven't done finally. Why am I trying to cut us off and go down finally today?
I don't know what this is.
This one comes to us live from Joshua Burkhardt on Twitter. Attended the AEW show last night. This is a bit of a victory lap for Andy Murray here. But he goes, he tagged me in it. It says, repping my boys, WhatCulture at AEW tonight. Look at this goddamn sign, man. Look at that. Look at the size of that thing. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you for showing your support.
Can you actually say it right, the word? Or is it just a gimmick at this point?
I can't say it. Go on.
Say push.
Push.
Can't do it, lads. You cannot do it.
I can say two things. I can say push or push. That's it. That's all it is. You know, I never knew that I couldn't say that word properly until I came on this YouTube channel. 31 years of life, come on YouTube once, and I can't say a word.
I love how it's like me saying, no, you can't say it properly. It's kind of racist because he's Scottish.
Yeah.
That's just how he talks.
Bit problematic. Anyway.
Sorry, Scotland.
Thank you for joining us today.
It's a lovely country. It really is.
It's the best country in the world, apart from Glasgow. Thank you for joining us today. I've been Andy Murray. You can follow us on Twitter. Glasgow's all right. I'm only joking. Don't get annoyed. You can follow us on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Send us your questions, push signs, anything else you may have. Hashtag this is the news. Hashtag good after news. You can follow Michael Sidgwick on Twitter at
Sidgwick.
You can follow me on Twitter at Andy H. Murray. The H stands for Henry, just like the Hoover. Goodbye.